Hello and welcome to our CC students and families. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this information session on housing. We're glad that you can be with us today. My name is Rochelle Dickey. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am Acting Dean of Students and Acting Vice President for Student Life here at Colorado College. I am also a CC alum and the proud parent of a 2019 Colorado College graduate. So I'm happy to be hosting and helping to moderate this afternoon. Let me lay out for you what we want to cover this afternoon and we'll go ahead and get started. So a quick recap of how we got to where we are. We're going to talk about the change in our 3-year live-on requirement, finances, billings, refunds, logistics of move in and move out to campus. We'll give information on supplemental housing at lodges and West Edge. We want to talk some about support for off-campus students, testing protocols, access to campus, and plans for after Block 2, cohort living, and some other things that we have in mind. In the interest of time, we'll let the other panelists introduce themselves as they answer questions. And we apologize in advance that we won't be able to get to all of your questions. We know there's a lot and there's group questions, but we have taken a look at the questions that were sent in previously and tried to group those into some of the themes that I've outlined, just a second ago. So we do have a switch in panelists this afternoon. We want to thank our residential experience and housing team who were all set to go, and we did some shifting of panelists at the last minute based on some of the questions that have come in. So I'm going to start with a quick recap of how we got to where we are. We know a lot of you perhaps have heard this before, but it's new to some of you. So in June, the college shared our fall plan. And the plan at that time was that we were inviting first years only to campus for Block 1. And then we had planned to bring the rest of our student body back for Blocks 2 and beyond that. And we did implement very strong testing, risk mitigation protocols campus-wide. We've been actually really received a lot of affirmation and positivity around the thoughtfulness of our protocols that went into place. So we were all set for that. However, as we know, even before Block 1 started, we did have students receive positive test results for COVID-19. And unfortunately, we were required to quarantine our 3 large major residence halls. And again, we say to all of our students who have had to experience that, that we're so sorry that you did have to experience isolation and quarantine. And thank you so much for patience, resilience, and understanding that this is what we needed to do on the recommendation of our partners at El Paso County Health to try to further mitigate risk and spread of that. So for those reasons, we did adjust our plan on September 1. And also had heard from our partners at El Paso County Health that we might expect continuing rolling quarantines on campus. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on what we're doing to, again, try to lower the possibility of those large-scale quarantines happening again. So again, on September 1, we adjusted our plans. And so for Blocks 2, 3, and 4, right now, we're just inviting students who must be on campus primarily for academic need. We're also accommodating some smaller groups of students, including our Bridge Scholars, international students, and students who are experiencing great hardship. So this new plan still does de-densify our campus. It still calls for less than half of our students to be on campus. And we know that all of those students will not choose to live on campus. They may be off campus. And again, the majority of those students who are with us right now for Blocks 2, 3, and 4, over 60% are students who are here for academic reasons. So as I said, we're still at less than 50% of our usual capacity. And just FYI, that 50% rule of thumb is something that we employ in our offices here on campus as well, making sure that we're staffing and having in person 50% of our staff in our offices. So our campus will be de-densified for the rest of 2020. We're going to add rapid testing cohort protocols, other tools, and continue to take some measured steps forward to bringing our entire student body back to campus in as safe and responsible a manner as we can. We will share our plans for Block J and forward. Block J starts in January. So next month in October, the college, we will announce our plans for what happens beyond blocks 2, 3, and 4. So a quick recap of how we got to where we are right now. As always, again, we acknowledge this is not the way we wanted to start the year, but we also want to acknowledge thankfulness and gratitude, especially for those students who reached out and said, not the way I wanted to start my CC career, but we're making the best of it. We're connecting with CC in unique ways and turning some challenges into opportunities. So we definitely applaud you for that. Thank you to our entire CC community for pitching in to help deliver meals and be with students during their outside time. Lots of resiliency exhibited here, and that's another reason that we always are proud of our community here. One of the other things I want to note is we know that people have been doing the right things. Again, excellent protocols in place, and we know that folks have been following a lot of the protocols. That being said, we know that COVID-19 is highly, highly infectious, and despite the best protocols, it can still hit anyone, anywhere at any time. But we do want to acknowledge a community who's dedicated to being COVID resilient and doing the right thing. So that's a quick recap. And at this point, I want to turn this over to Edwin Hamada to give you a little bit of information about housing, 3-year living requirements, and I'll let him cue up the rest of what he's going to talk about. Thanks, Edwin.
Thank you, Dean Dickey. So I wanted, as Dean Dickey noted, there are a lot of unique circumstances that have been happening. And so the college has lifted the 3-year residency requirement for this current academic year. All students are allowed to seek off-campus housing in Colorado Springs. And for those students that are receiving need-based financial aid that choose to relocate to a Colorado Springs apartment, the cost of living will remain the same. And we have some panelists that will highlight a little bit more about the specifics about some of the costs that can articulate better than I can. However, for those students that are relocating to their home address, the cost of attendance obviously will reflect that reduced cost of living allowance. Those students that are residing in Colorado Springs, there will be resources for them. The Student Health Center is available, and we are having plans to provide some other on-campus resources available, such as curbside pickup for the library, looking at different options for some of the other facilities on campus. So that is what I'll talk about in regards to some of the 3-year live-in lift. I'm going to hand it off to our financial aid folks, Shannon and Lori. Actually, Lori is Seeger's next.
Thanks, Edwin. My name is Lori Seeger. I'm happy to serve as the Associate Vice President for Finance at the college. And I'm happy to be here with you today to talk a little bit more specifically with my colleague Shannon Amundsen about the finances surrounding some of these changes. So I'm going to go over some specific scenarios, as will Shannon, that will hopefully help you wrap your mind around the specifics on what adjustments you might see on your student's account. Those with block 1 room assignments in residence halls that have experienced quarantines, as is the case and was mentioned by our co-presidents in a message last week, will receive a full reversal of this year's housing charges. Unless, and there's some caveats here, they've been invited to stay for blocks 2 through 4, and they've accepted this invitation to remain on campus. Since they'll be here for more than 3 other blocks, that essentially equates to a semester's charge. So there will be no reversal of the fall semester housing charges. All other students that are currently on campus for Block 1 will pay 1/4 of the semester's room charge and their full amount of the meal plan used up to the date that they leave campus, plus a 1/4 of the semester's dining service or overhead fee. Students who have not and will not be on campus for all of fall will see a full reversal of their housing and meal plan charges on their student account. We're working through a lot of these details, as you can imagine. Next week, we expect to have final lists of those who will remain on campus or come to campus and those who will be living off campus. And at that time, we'll begin adjustments for both housing and meal plan and related financial aid on students' accounts. We expect to have all of the information that we need and the timing to process all of those changes so that refunds could be issued by October 1st for overpayments. That's especially important for those that will be needing those funds to help with off-campus expenses, and we're definitely mindful of that. I'm going to turn the remainder of the time here over to my colleague Shannon.
Hi, everybody. My name's Shannon Amundsen. I'm the Director of Financial Aid here at CC. For those of you who've been in on other town halls, you've probably listened to me speak before. So things I want to talk about. If you are a family who's on a payment plan, and I'm just going to round number here as we're talking through things, okay? If you have a payment plan and you're paying $30,000 and your student chooses to move off campus and stays here in the Springs, and let's just, again, round number, you're going to save $13,000 in housing. At that point, your payment plan will adjust. It will reduce how much you owe CC, and you're only going to owe the college $17,000. That savings of your room and board is what you would use to help fund that off-campus living. We've gotten questions from several families, when is my child going to get the check? That doesn't necessarily apply to every single student. Some students will see a refund. They will be able to do that, and I'll go through that here in a second too. If you're not sure what this is going to look like for your family, please email financialaid@coloradocollege.edu. If your student has financial aid and you want to know, if my student finds a place to live, if my student returns home, what's it going to look like for our bill? We're happy to answer that. We did have a town hall yesterday afternoon. At that time, our email was current and caught up, and we were responding quickly. As you can imagine, after yesterday's town hall, we have a little bit to catch up on, so please allow us a little bit of grace as we work through those. Like I said, we were current as of yesterday, but it may take us more than a few hours to get back to you because of the volume we got yesterday. So, but we're working on it, I can assure you. If for full pay families who've paid all of fall, the assumption is that the extra payment for room and board when they move off is going to be credited towards your spring payment. That's our default. There will be a form coming. It will be on the student accounts page. It will be there before October 1 for a student to request the refund of those funds. The student has to request them. It is the student account. I realize every year I say that as parents write us checks, that parents are like, are you kidding? And I get it, but it is legally their account. But they can have the check issued back to you as the parent when they fill out the refund form, or have it, direct deposited in that way. So please know that. But our default is going to be to forward it to the spring payment. If you are somebody who's paid the whole year in advance, and you are like, well, my kid's not coming back at this point on campus, I'm going to get a refund, that will happen. That will be part of our automatic process. But the automatic process for refunds is to issue those to students. Some parents want their student to have that money to pay for their off-campus housing. Other parents are like, you should never give my child $7,000 or $13,000 at once. That's a horrible plan. And I understand. When my daughter's only 25, it wasn't that long ago. So something to keep in mind as you're working through what that's going to look like. If you want that refund to come to you, make sure to talk to your student about that, so that you can they have the option of setting that up with the student accounts office. So just make sure that you're aware of that happening. So another example of a family may be that the student pays $2,000 for the year after all their student loans and their aid is applied. They're going to move off campus to an apartment, so they're going to have a refund of about $13,000. And that's, or a credit back of $13,000. In that student's case, they're going to have a credit of $11,000 for the year. $13,000 minus the $2,000 they owed. That student is going to receive half of that each semester to help pay their bills off campus. So that's something to consider. I've talked to a couple of families who've said, I'd rather, as the parent, it comes to me and I can dole it out because the student isn't very good at budgeting. I have other students who, if you give them $5,000, they turn it into $5,500. They're very good at budgeting, right? And so that's up to you as a family, how you'd prefer to do that. But that's how it'll work to help subsidize that off-campus housing if your student is having aid help subsidize their on-campus housing. So both of those are an option. Please know that we're working on it. As Lori said, when we get those lists, billing may make adjustments on, I'm going to pick a day, September 15th, and financial aid adjustments, we may be a day behind, maybe September 16th. So your bill's going to have some fluctuation, and so will your payment plan. A couple of things that I can assure you. One, we are not charging late fees in the month of September. That is not a concern that you need to worry about. If you need to wait and watch those adjustments, please know that you will not be charged a late fee. Two, we are working on getting all of them updated, but due to, right, just timing, human workload, it may not happen on the exact same date, which may make your bill look really wonky. Give it 2 days. If it still looks weird, please let us know. But we know that there may be some timing issues. So those things are all coming in the next couple of weeks. I am going to turn this back to Edwin, and he will take it from there.
Thank you so much. If I can just jump on just a second, and excuse me, Edwin, thank you so much, Shannon and Lori. Got some questions in, so I just wanted to just hit the pause button real quick before turning it back over to Edwin Hamada, who's our Assistant Vice President for the residential experience. So to clarify the lifting of the 3-year live-on requirement, we do want everyone to be clear that that is just for the current academic year. As Edwin mentioned earlier, we're recognizing that folks are in unique circumstances this year. So we'll be retaking a look at the 3-year live-on requirement. We'll do that this spring and decide what we're going to do moving forward. So I'm seeing some questions where folks think that we're automatically then going to revert to a 2-year live-on requirement or go back to 3 or keep it suspended. You know, beyond this academic year. So I just wanted folks to know we have not made those decisions yet. Right now we're lifting the 3-year live-on requirement for this year. We'll take a look at it again, and then certainly we'll announce how we move forward from there, but just wanted to take a moment to clarify that. So thank you, Edwin, and we'll turn it back over to you now.
Great. The next couple of topics, and thank you for introducing myself and my position, because apparently I do not do that myself. The next 3 topics that we'll be talking about is move out. I'll be discussing move in a little bit, and then I will be hitting the other hot topic is some of the supplemental housing. The lodges in West Edge there's been a lot of questions regarding that. And then I'll be discussing a little bit about some of the resources that we have on campus. So let me share my screen. All right, I'm hoping that is shared, and somebody will probably text me if that is not the case. So for the move out process, that is happening actually now until September 20th. And as I'm looking out my window, I could see students that are gathering boxes and getting prepped up for that. It applies to any student that has not been approved or have received exception to stay on campus. And also it applies to those students that are choosing to live off campus in an apartment in Colorado Springs. Again, kind of going back to the lift of the 3-year hold. The 3-year live-in rule is they would also be moving out. Those students, again, would remove all their items from their room. They're officially checking out, and so we do not have space to store any items. They're fully checking out like it would be the end of the year. They would be putting their key. We have something called an express checkout. They'd be putting their keys in a key envelope and putting it in a special key box in Loomis, Matthias, and South Halls. And then again, those students would be labeling the envelope with their name and their room numbers to ensure that we are able to process those move outs quickly. As I mentioned before, we have moving boxes available in some of the lobbies of Loomis, Matthias, and South. And so students can go down and grab some boxes to start packing up and get ready for their next adventure. The email ccmoveout@coloradocollege.edu is monitored by our staff member that is helping out with move out and has been responsive and on top of those emails. So if you have any questions, maybe unique circumstances, email that and they'll be more than happy to help you out. And as always, your RA or RLC is always there to assist and answer any questions as they do with a lot of things. The one thing I want to say about move-in, specific information will be sent out tomorrow. But just to let you know about the days of move-in, we are shooting for September 17th. Oh, let me shoot there. September 17th and 18th. And we're coordinating it with the COVID testing hours too. So the COVID testing hours are 10 to 4:30. Again, we would like students to arrive on campus, sign up for testing before they actually move into the residence halls to ensure that there's an additional layer of safety when it comes to social distancing. The reason why we are asking students to arrive on the 17th and 18th is so the test could come back, hopefully, positive or not positive, COVID-free, and they would be able to attend class if they had in-person class before Monday. So that the test could take a couple of days. The rapid testing has not necessarily been implemented yet, but for this current move-in, those tests could take a couple of days depending upon how busy the labs are. So the ideal date, again, is September 17th and 18th. We do have some weekend move-in times, but again, it will cause more problems. So ideally, individuals could move in on the 17th and the 18th. Like I mentioned before, information will be sent out tomorrow with very much more detail than I'm presenting in this session here. So the larger question that we've seen pop up is the supplemental housing of West Edge and the lodges. So our housing office has been working very hard to convert some of those apartments back to the leasing office. So we're leasing some Colorado College controlled units and then providing those for the leasing office to disperse and rent out to other Colorado College students. Again, students that are approved to live on campus and were assigned in July to one of those spaces, they would have their lease through us, Colorado College. If students were not approved to live on campus and they were able to lease directly with the West Edge or the lodges, again, that would be a private and individual lease through the student and that leasing office. The reason we are asking students to not mix apartments is because an apartment should be full of students that were approved to live on campus and are working through the Colorado College housing office, or entirely individual leases through those individual companies. Again, the mixed apartments, we're not allowing that because it just ends up causing a lot of problems with that. Let me stop sharing and talk about some of the other resources that we have, I know that we've heard from some parents about, well, now my student is being kicked off campus and there's no resources and we're sort of sending them to the wolves. And that really has not obviously been the goal, and that is a large concern of the college. Rochelle didn't mention this, but I recently started here, and the one thing I could say about all my colleagues, I started here September 1st, the one thing I could say about all my colleagues and everybody that I've interacted with and the culture here is that they care. They care a lot about students. They care about the student success and the student experience, obviously through the decisions that were made prior to my arrival and that are happening now. So I'm very confident that we're all on the same page, that we are looking out for our students and what their experiences are, even if they aren't on campus, what that off-campus experience looks like. As I mentioned before, there are many facilities that I think students want to access, that we have different committees and different working groups looking at how can we allow students to safely engage with the college community and not endanger others and keep it within a controlled environment. And a lot of the work is being done and again, we're implementing many of these things. Again, it takes a little bit of time because we want the decisions to be holistic, and many offices need to be sure that we are on the same page and that we're not sort of rowing in different directions. And so some of those decisions take a little bit of a while, and I could understand as a parent that is very frustrating, but it's also more frustrating for us to start a process and then turn around halfway through the process and say, oh, we forgot an office to include an office, and so therefore we're having to shift this way when in fact you might have already started along a certain process. And so we want to do it right the first time, and that sometimes will take a little bit of time. But some of the resources, as I mentioned before, the Wellness Resource Center is taking virtual appointments, and so they are always here for our students, and so that is a definite resource that we have out there. Despite the fact that students are out in the community, and the Colorado Springs Police Department would obviously navigate outside of the college environment, we do have a liaison, a former Colorado College alum, Sid Santos, that is our resource officer. So that definitely helps, I think, sort of bridge the gap between city police and our own campus safety here. We do have different programs that have been implemented in the past to help students sort of navigate what the on-campus world is like. So maybe it's talking about leases, maybe it's health and safety and healthy living. It might be how to navigate conflict and being a good neighbor to the campus community. But one thing that we don't want is we want to be sure that Colorado College's reputation is maintained both nationally, but definitely within Colorado Springs. And so we want to be sure that our students are good neighbors and know how to navigate the off-campus setting as much as we assist them in navigating the on-campus setting. So with that, I believe I've hit my talking points, and I'm going to pass it over to Rochelle to kind of take us to the next section.
Thank you so much, Edwin, and thank you for highlighting. I know a lot of parents and students were concerned with the lifting of the 3-year live-on requirement, and as students go out into the community, what support are we offering? Again, we know this will be new to some of you, especially some of our younger students, keeping in mind that in the past it was typically our seniors that we allowed to go off campus. So again, just emphasizing what Edwin said, look for those off-campus prep workshops to come from the residential experience in housing and working with our CSPD resource officer about reading leases, about not making verbal agreements. And I want to emphasize and thank our students for being good neighbors in the community, and we hear that from our from the surrounding community a lot, and know that they'll welcome our students who choose to be a part of that community as well. A question again about the 3-year live-on requirement, that if we decided to reinstitute that, then would we make folks move back on campus to be able to complete 6 semesters? So when we say a 3-year live-on requirement, that really, that equals 6 semesters living on campus. Again, these are details to work out, but I would imagine as we move forward, we'll be taking all of that into consideration. And I think the term I'm looking for is sort of a grandfather clause, or students that we allowed to move off campus while we suspended the 3-year live-on requirement. So if we choose to reinstitute that, or however that might look like, probably from that point forward, and not requiring people to have to move back on to complete 6 semesters. So I do hope that clarifies that. Again, folks don't always have all the details worked out, but certainly want to take all of those types of things into consideration moving forward with that. As Edwin did mention, we know it's a concern to a lot of our students who are off campus, who haven't been approved to be on campus. We know there's a lot of you that have let us know, I would still like to have access to campus in some way. Students have told us that being able to come on campus to print things, or to be able to go to the fitness center, or to be able to come to Warner and check mail. So students, we want you to know that we've heard that. We do have, as Edwin mentioned, a campus team that's taking a look at that to make sure that we can give all of our students access to campus. So we have heard that. There's some quick work that the team has to do on that to try to get this up and running for Block 2. But students, if you're off campus, and I'm talking to you about this, if you haven't been approved and you're saying I want access to campus, there are a couple of things we want to queue you up that we'll need from you in terms of addresses, phone numbers, roommates, those types of things. And we'll need that information from you students again, so we can make sure that we're giving you the access to campus for that, but also in terms of our contact tracing and safety protocols. Again, as we have sort of stepped in phase by phase with testing students on campus, enhancing testing protocols, off-campus students, you will become a part of our testing protocols and our random sampling test group. So again, as we incorporate you into these protocols happening on campus, we would really have to know how to be able to reach you if contact tracers needed to reach you. So random sampling is something that we do on our campus twice a week, and that captures roughly 33% of our population. So again, this is information that'll be coming out pretty soon about students, if you're off campus, getting access to campus. So again, we're looking at the library, Warner Center, the Press Fitness Center, the athletic practice facilities, and all students all along have had access to the health center. So that's something that we emphasize. So even for our off-campus students who maybe haven't been able to come to Warner or the library, all students for health reasons have been able to go to the health center, to be able to check in with them if you're feeling a little bit off and need access to asymptomatic testing as well has been there. So again, we just wanted to queue you up for that. And again, thank you for letting us know your concerns about that. And certainly we did need to wait until we've got more testing protocols in place to be able to expand the scope of students that access campus. So we're glad that we are anticipating having that up and running. Just want to give accolades to our Vice President for Information Technology, Brian Young. Many of you have heard him talk at a number of these town halls or information sessions, and he regrets that he's not able to join us today, but did want to make sure that I shared that information with you as well. So again, what we're looking at having the ability to do our own testing here on campus. Right now with our testing, we're doing a turnaround time of about 1 to 2 days for test results. As a matter of fact, Vice President Young is on the phone right now with the folks from Abbott Labs. And when we get those machines up and running on our campus, we can do a turnaround time of hours with test results and not days. So again, as we enhance these types of testing protocols, that allows us again to be able to increase the number of students that have access to our campus, that have access to testing. And so we're really excited about that. And we know you are too, and we look forward to sharing those details with you. Edwin mentioned as well, and so I do want to reemphasize ongoing support for all of our students, whether you're going to be with us in person here on campus, or whether you're in the surrounding neighborhood around the world or across the country. Our offices are here. We are open for business. Some of you have really already been making use of the great resources on campus, and it's been an absolute pleasure to get to know our students and serve our students. So again, we're available in person and remotely, and offices are posting schedules of, hey, if you're on campus and you need to speak to someone in person, here's the days we're here, but remote access for all of our students. Mental health, emotional health, physical health, all of those things are critically important to us, as we know they are to you. Edwin already mentioned some of our wonderful support services. I've got a whole list I'd just like to share with you to always remind you. So campus activities, does evening and weekend social programming, there's block break programming. Our colleagues in the Butler Center, headed by Rosalie Rodriguez, who's one of our 3 new senior associate deans for diversity, equity, and inclusion as part of the college's ongoing anti-racism initiatives. Career Center, I've mentioned the Health Center, Student Health and Wellbeing, Wellness Resource Center. We have 24/7 Sexual Assault Response Coordinator, our Indigenous Native American Scholar in Resident, the Student Opportunities Advising Hub, chaplains, outdoor education, residential experience, fitness center, and the list goes on and on. So again, a lot of these are accessed remotely as well, even all of those wonderful programming and engagement opportunities we talked about, and also just an opportunity to connect and have fun. We recognize we're talking about some pretty heavy topics and things here, but having fun is certainly a part of the Colorado College experience, and we want you to be able to engage and have that fun, again, whether you're here with us on campus or remotely. So what's next? I think we're getting ready to wrap up and then be able to answer some more questions. I just reiterate that the college will make a decision next month in October regarding our plans for second semester, which starts with our new Block J in January. And I'm going to invite Edwin back into this conversation as we talk a little bit more about something he mentioned earlier, sort of the cohort, pod, or cluster living. So a lot of you have been really concerned and say, hey, thanks for inviting me to stay on campus. I'm thinking about it. I've already experienced quarantine. Don't want to go through that again. And certainly that's not something we want for any of our students. Honestly, folks, we have no guarantees. That would be disingenuous to say, wow, that'll never happen again. But here are some things that we're really exploring. And we continue to learn a lot about this as well, to try to really reduce the risk of those types of all-hall quarantines happening again. So one of the things we're certainly exploring with our experts here on campus, and we've got, and we include some of our students among those experts, they've been really exploring sort of the cohort or pod or cluster living, which again is living and socializing based around social networks. So typically our residence hall assignments have been somewhat random, or, you know, putting roommates together, you know, maybe based on some commonalities. You're a night person and morning person, those types of things. So we're really trying to be more intentional about that and working with students on this. So certainly that we know the virus, highly contagious, definitely can travel a lot in friend groups and cohorts. So our rationale behind that is if we institute and change our residential model and look more at cohorts, that rather than quarantining a whole hall, perhaps it just might be a wing or a cluster of students or a pod. We're using a lot of these words types sort of interchangeably, but our students have told us already that that really seems to resonate with them. Sort of living and having the same social networks. So that's what's on tap, again, as we look for announcing our plans and hopefully being able to work towards our goal of inviting all of our students back to campus. We will be looking at some different types of residential models, again, with the eye towards trying to reduce these large scale quarantines. We had a wonderful walkthrough of some of our facilities the other day with some colleagues from El Paso County Health Department. They kind of give us a thumbs up on that model as well. So that's another way that we're working again as we continue to learn more about how to mitigate risk on campus and how to try to make the residential experience better for our students. And I'm glad that Brian Young has been able to join us. And Edwin, and I'll let you both chime in. So Brian, I've given a little information about adding our off-campus students for access and to random sampling testing. So I'll turn it over to you if there's anything else you'd like to add on that. Thank you.
No, thanks, Rochelle. And sorry I popped in late. I'm in between. We all seem to be in between Zooms today. Our testing strategy will be changing dramatically for the better. We already had a robust testing strategy where we were testing based on our scientific and epidemiology modeling, as well as monitoring the local spread with El Paso County Health. We've been using our health partners, UC Health, who have been tremendous to do our PCR testing, which is a molecular nasal swab. Turnaround times are in the still pushing right around 48 hours to 36 hours, which is fairly good based on where things were. We'll continue that option as well. But CC also was able to, through the help of a number of parents, provide access to the same reliability but quicker turnaround time test, which we will be standing up here over the next 2 weeks. That will give us the ability to have more rapid testing with turnaround times in hours versus days. As well as expand our capabilities of testing to off-campus and more frequency. So currently we're doing 33% of our on-campus and off-campus students in terms of random sampling happening Wednesday and Thursdays, again, based on scientific and epidemiological models that have both been checked and tested. And then we will be increasing and the ability to have more rapid testing here in the very near future. So that's kind of where we are on the testing front. Obviously, different models out there. I can assure you, we've looked at well over 1,000 different models. I know many of you will share a campus is doing it this way or this way. I can assure you that based on our local health, our state partners, our CDC guidance from Denver, that we have a very strong model. We are catching cases and making sure that certainly our student population continues to adhere to the good practices, social distancing, while you're waiting for a test or symptomatic, try to isolate as much as possible, quarantine as much as possible, and try not to interact until you receive the results of that test. So Dean Dickey, that's sort of where we are with testing and where our future is. I feel very confident that our work with El Paso County Health over the last number of days, between leadership at the college and them, with walkthroughs, with understanding our science, understanding our evidence-based approach, understanding new treatments and testing that we have access to, as well as some additional non-specific person testing, but we have access now to kits for wastewater testing, which gives us another leg up than others to be able to quickly capture the spread of COVID.
Thank you so much, Vice President Young. That's great information to have, and we know folks appreciate having those types of good details on that. Edwin, I'm going to turn it back over to you for a minute. I don't know if you had anything else to add sort of about our cohort or pod living models that we hope to introduce. And then I also wanted to refer some questions to you, Edwin. There's a lot of logistical questions about if a student is on campus right now and has a room assignment, but then they're going to perhaps be returning home and doing remote, maybe block 3 or 4, what happens to room assignments? So lots of questions of if things hold over or not. And I'm looking on my screen. Did we perhaps lose Edwin? We might have, folks, so maybe we'll give him a moment more to go ahead and sign back in. While we've got Vice President Young with us, I'm going to sort of ask our folks who are sort of moderating and skimming questions if there's anything particularly about testing that we can refer to Brian while he's here, while we wait for Edwin to overcome some technical difficulties. Let's go ahead and get those questions to Brian.
We have a question someone asked a while ago, wanting to know what the specifics of going forward are with regards to rolling quarantines.
Right, so I can say that there is no 100% assurance that we won't see rolling quarantines. It's just, it's not in the cards. And I'd be lying if I told you that we could 100% guarantee that. As a matter of fact, even today, learned from a colleague that we have 2,200 faculty and staff and students at the University of Tennessee, which already has minimal numbers in quarantine. So what I can share with you are concrete steps that we've worked with our county health department to make sure that that what they are hearing from students, they reach out, they contact trace, so do we, but they have authority, they have the ability to do that. And to make sure that what they're hearing and what they are getting in terms of information from their contact tracing matches what CC has in terms of our science, data, and our contact tracing. And so our new relationship going forward, using our scientific model, using our modeling from our on-campus science team, using access to data for our key card access, so we know exactly who's been where, that we can reduce greatly the need to have large quarantines or rolling quarantines. On top of that, our additional testing capabilities, along with capabilities that only a few others are really doing, which is wastewater testing, making sure that those components tied to a number of other things that I'm sure you might have heard about today, like continuing to de-densify, continuing to utilize all the spaces we have, minimize the number of folks that utilize the same bathroom, try to make sure we can work in cohorts and pods as much as possible, that we can drive that option down that El Paso County has to do large quarantines. And so I feel very confident of the strategies we put in place of our recent walkthrough, that we will minimize the need to see those. I go back to this though, that there is no guarantee if we are found to have a positive case and that positive case didn't necessarily adhere to the right protocols and went around to multiple locations, and it could happen, but we've tried to do all we can to minimize based on their expectations as they see them. And we check in weekly because we want to make sure that we're in compliance and in guidance with what they're seeing change in the El Paso County region.
Thank you so much, Thank you so much, Brian. And Edwin, I'm glad you were able to join us again on a different device there. So Edwin, we did have some questions. I'm going to sort of group these together. There's a lot of questions about releasing units at the Lodge and West Edge. Is there transportation provided from supplemental housing? Do those students have to be on a meal plan? So first, that group of questions about the lodges and West Edge, and then a question about room assignments, and will room assignments be held if a student's on campus now in housing and then perhaps leaves for block 3 or 4 remotely? Are things held over to the spring? So I'll let you field those questions.
All right, well, thank you for your patience as my computer decides to update right during this session. The one question about is transportation going to be provided for supplemental housing? And what we are needing to do is to see how many of our students are actually going to be living in those supplemental housing units. And so that decision hasn't been made. I know that earlier conversations about different transportation options were being explored, but again, if there isn't a lot of students that are in CC housing that are at a distance, then it may not be feasible to be able to find some type of transportation options out there. And so if students are concerned about the distance, they could work with our office to try to find something that is actually on campus if they don't have access to other transportation that is out there. In regards to a meal plan, I know that our partners at Bon Appetit are working hard to try to figure out which facilities are and the hours and that entire process. Unfortunately, I haven't been involved in any of those meetings, but I know that our campus partners are working to try to find options for students that they could eat if in fact they have on-campus classes and eating resources. Obviously, our students on campus will have some dining options out there. Right now, I'm not quite sure what that looks like. But from an off-campus perspective, part of the excitement of living in an apartment is trying to figure out how to cook delicious meals. And so I think that's part of the apartment experience. But again, having some on-campus resources, that is obviously one of the things that we understand that we need to feed folks that have classes on campus, if they're in the residence halls or if they're living on campus. So those are the answers to that. It is one other question I know that had popped up was about if the leases are converted from CC housing to either the West Edge or the lodges, because you would be leasing directly from them, you would be paying the rates that they would be that they have, and you'd be signing their lease agreement. So it could be different, and the lease could look different too. It wouldn't be through CC housing. Rochelle, I'm not sure about some of the other questions that I can't remember because I've been that we might have.
Certainly, and just a lot of questions about supplemental housing, about the college releasing those leases. Okay. Guidance for first year students in particular, and we had, announced again that reiterated, the college was in attempts to de-densify at this point, asking students to leave campus unless they were approved to stay for those academic reasons or some of those other small cohorts of students that we mentioned. But I saw something in the chat room of just some parents of first years looking for a little more guidance with what they do with their students. If their students are planning to stay here in Colorado Springs, or again, someone said, should we just come and pick up our students? I would say the answer to that is yes, unless your student has been approved to stay on campus. Again, as we try to de-densify campus, those decisions have been made about academic priority in particular. So I hope that helps to clarify that some. So Edwin, again, more questions about lodges, releasing those, how accessible are those for students?
Yeah, that's yeah. Our housing team has been meeting with both of those complexes this past week, and even been in communication beyond that. I know that when decisions are being made, and as I mentioned, by tomorrow, we're hoping to have very specific instructions on how to, what is being released, how that process is going about. So those are plans that are in the works. Again, it is there's a lot of individual confusing questions that I know we've been trying to address, a lot of what ifs. And so I know that my team is very hard at work at trying to eliminate a lot of the what if questions, and again, having the information done correctly. But like I said, I do know that there have been meetings that have been taking place, and that the goal was to get something officially out there on by this Friday. In regards to first year students that might be interested in living off campus, I mean, as I mentioned before, there are some resources that are out there. The reality of it is that it's because it's out in the community. There are physically there are just not, the resources are a little bit further away, and so I think those decisions will need to be taken into consideration, because it is a pretty big step to move, to be living on campus to moving off campus, and I think those are pretty good conversations to have with your parents or your son or daughter or your loved one, to kind of explore what that might look like, what that experience is, how they might best navigate that, given potentially what, being a little bit more autonomous living. So I think I would encourage parents to have conversations about what that might look like, and what that experience might be. Again, as we've been trying to emphasize, we are not saying that we're just shooting people off to the community and they're there to fend for themselves. Again, part of the reason why Colorado College is as special a place that it is that everybody cares, and that there are many staff and other student peers that are here to provide support, that are here to assist with whatever we can. And so that is something that I think parents and students will need to have those conversations to sort of explore what that looks like.
Thank you, Edwin. Also, one of those questions about how room assignments will be held, and if those will be held over. And then we'll come back and maybe have room for another question, and then maybe a couple of closing words for our panelists. So thank you.
Yeah, with room assignments, once a student moves out, their housing, their room assignment will be canceled for the entire year. That doesn't mean that their room assignment is permanently gone. Again, we're working on plans. We're waiting for decisions to be made about spring semester, the spring blocks. And so what we're trying to do is remain open and flexible. So when we do have open spaces, we are keeping those spaces sort of documented, kind of keeping track of where the open spaces are. And then when it comes time for what spring looks like, depending upon which direction we go, we'll determine what we do with those rooms. You know, it's a lot of work for our staff to reassign for this every semester. That is not a very sustainable housing model, and so that's not our goal. However, if in fact we need to pivot and we need to make a different density or different housing assignments, we will do that. On the flip side, if a student had left maybe after block 1, despite the fact that their housing contracts have been canceled, if they enjoyed their room and we were opening up back to relatively normal operations and their room were available, we would definitely want to try to provide them with as familiar of a setting as possible. So I think our goal would be to try to put people back to where they actually started. But again, we can't make that promise because we just don't know what the future holds. But again, that's all tracked in our housing database. We know when people moved out, we know where they lived, and we know if they want their same room and it's open, we will be happy to give it to them.
Thank you so much, Edwin. And I'd like to answer a final last question that some folks sent to me privately. All that list of resources that I was giving to all of you, again, I want to emphasize that all of those resources are available remotely. There was some confusion about, well, if students aren't on campus, how can they access those resources? So we did want to clarify that. I'll just ask our moderators real quick, we're a minute over. As you scan through the questions, was there sort of anything else that jumped out at you that we could answer pretty quickly before we wrap up here?
Hi, Rochelle, this is Shannon. I'm getting some text messages from the Facebook Live and wanted to, and I saw some in the QA as well, that for clarity, that there will be some on-campus access. We don't have that fully released yet, but if students are living off campus and need to come to class on campus, yes, that is going to be possible. And if they're right, so I just want to clarify, I know we don't
sure.
all of it
Yes.
pushed out yet, but that seems to be a running concern that I'm getting. So
Understood. Thank you so much for bringing that up. So a little bit of clarity. If you are a student who has been approved to be on campus and you say, thanks for the invitation, but I think I'm going to go rent a house over on Weber, you still have access to campus. So students who are approved have access. The gap has been for students who have not been approved for classes and they're living off campus, and those students, we've heard from you that you need access to campus as well. So as clarification, that's what the team is working on putting together and having in place for block 2. And again, just to quickly recap, we needed to make sure, as Brian explained to us, that our testing protocols were up and running. Again, being able to have our own labs and some quick turnaround time on campus, again, allows us to be able to say, we can now invite more students to have access to campus in addition to those students who will be staying with us here on campus. So I hope that does help to clarify that, again, to get that for block 2 so that any Colorado College student who is here will be able to have some access to campus. And with that, we're 4 minutes over. I want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. Hopefully we've been able to answer some questions. Edwin, I do want to invite you back on for folks who do have questions, and what's the best way for them to get questions answered quickly, knowing that folks are fielding a lot of emails. If you can give them the address, or if there's a certain contact, if folks have some follow-up questions, and certainly we're saving all the questions here and making sure that they get to folks who maybe can answer and weren't with us today. So thanks for that info, Edwin.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, the CC move out at coloradocollege.edu is our information specific to move out. Our housing at coloradocollege.edu, we're very inundated, and we are working on getting additional staffing to follow up with many of the questions, but that we are a little bit behind on that. So we will work diligently to try to get those emails answered. But right now, those are two direct resources. A lot of I think if we try to figure out maybe a way to maybe add things to the frequently asked questions, that might be another resource. But right now, just those two emails are our best option out there.
Thank you so much, Edwin. And you mentioned a good point. After each of these information sessions, the FAQs on the main COVID website are updated, so we thank our staff for doing that. Financial aid at coloradocollege.edu. Shannon, is that the best email for folks who have questions about that?
Yep, if you are a student here on financial aid, absolutely, that is the best one. If you're a full pay student and have questions about your bill or the direct bill, please email studentaccounts@coloradocollege.edu. They'll be able to tell you what your charges look like, things like that, quicker probably than the financial aid inbox when we're going through student financial aid stuff.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, everyone. We're glad you chose Colorado College. We're glad you're part of our community, whether near or far. Again, and to just reiterate that as we continue to pay attention to ways to help our community to be safe and thrive, that we really do look forward and hope and are working towards the goal of being able to welcome all of our students back to campus. And so we are definitely working with that goal in mind. So thank you, everyone. Again, we know we love Colorado College and our community. We're glad to have you with us, and thanks for joining us today.